Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be going over color trends for 2025. So every year at this time of year in the fall, the paint cartels come out with their color palettes and their colors of the year. A bunch of paint companies do it to talk about the color trends coming for the new year. And Benjamin Moore's just came out this morning. I'm filming this on the 16th. It just came out. So I'm going to be covering Behr, Sherwin Williams, as well as Benjamin Moore in this video today. Let's get going. Okay, but before we discuss the 2025 colors of the year, I want to take a moment and discuss today's sponsor, which is Aquasana. Aquasana offers environmentally mindful filtration systems that keep your water mineral rich while also being contaminant free. I love the One Clean Water Machine filter. It lasts about 7.5 times longer than sort of the leading pitcher filter that you might be familiar with, which for me, because I'm lazy, it means you're changing it a lot less and also a lot more environmentally responsible because you're not changing out these filters all the time. So I really love this product, especially for people that live in cities that don't have access to really great tasting water. I actually have a friend that lives also in a kind of a remote island sort of community. He has a cabin there. He doesn't live there full time, but giving him this was really great because it just makes it a lot easier with well water to be able to have great tasting water all the time, even if you don't have access to it just coming straight from the tap. So if you are ready to start drinking cleaner, healthier water, scan the QR code or click on the link in my description to get 55% off all systems over $49, and you also get free shipping as well. So thank you, Aquasana, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to those colors of the year for 2025. Okay, so first I'm just gonna really quick share my thoughts of what I think, because I mean, who do you believe? Do you believe me or multi-million-dollar companies that have tons and tons of designers on the payroll that research this stuff all year? Who are you gonna believe? I think there's two colors that are trending right now. I mean, there's lots of colors, of course, that are really popular, blah, blah, blah. But I would say like two colors that seem new for this year. One is sort of like a red wine, really dark red, moody red color. Red is oftentimes difficult to pull off in design, I find, in my opinion. And when it's really dark and saturated like this, I'm just in love with this color. I love it. Like personally, my favorite color that I want to incorporate in my new home eventually, that I think has to have a presence in there somewhere, is Bewitched by Benjamin Moore. I love this color so much. I think it's gorgeous. This color is really popular in my opinion. Didn't make Benjamin Moore's list, but that's okay because this is what my pick is. I also really think yellow is having a moment, another color that can be really challenging. I think just a really like buttery yellow is really popular. A lot of it just feels really light and feels really fresh and sort of feels very cottagey, and I just see a lot of yellow. I see a lot of yellow. I see it brought in with a lot of interesting patterns coming back, paisleys, wide stripes, just lots of really interesting yellows. So those are my picks. I just see those colors being used a lot in design and I like to see it. I like the red color a little bit more than I like the yellow, but that's just me. Anyway, let's get going and talk about Behr. So Behr's prediction is actually interesting because I think their red is actually very similar to what I just talked about. And they do have a yellow that is actually also quite similar to what I talked about. But red is their color of the year. It is this sort of red burgundy color rumors. Personally, I'd like to see it a little bit darker, but not by much. Honestly, this is, I think, actually a really spot on color, in my opinion, of what I see a lot happening in design right now. I just see this color everywhere. I think overall the trend is colors moving towards being a little bit moodier or being a little bit darker. So if you've seen my color palette video, you'll know that when you add white to a primary hue, like blue or red or green or whatever, when you add white, it becomes a lighter tinted version. When you add gray, it becomes quite desaturated, which is just a mix of black and white. But when you add black, it becomes sort of like just a really like darker sort of shade of black, a darker shade of that primary hue. So I'm seeing black and gray being added to a lot of colors lately to create something a little bit moodier and a little bit darker, just really draw those walls in a little bit more and to be really cozy. That's what I see as being really popular right now. And this palette I think does a pretty good job of doing that. So I really like Rumors. I think it's a really cool color of the year. Good job, Behr. The overall palette itself is quite saturated. Like it's kind of got a bit of everything. It's got blues, greens, oranges, yellows, light colors, darker colors, midtones. Like it's kind of got the whole gambit there. So I think they just sort of covered their bases by putting everything in this palette, but I do like the color of the year and I personally do agree with it. Okay, and then next, let's talk about Sherwin Williams. So I actually went to IDS, which is the interior design show here in Vancouver. It's like the biggest design show in the city. I was there just a couple of weeks ago and I went to a 9 a.m. workshop, like I was back in freaking university or high school or something, where they gave me this. So I went to actually a Sherwin Williams workshop and I learned about their color palettes. Okay, this is the research, this is the hard-hitting journalism that I do here at the Nick Lewis channel. You're welcome. And we learned about Sherwin Williams palettes. They cheated and have 4 palettes, which again, I think is a cheat. But theirs is interesting because what they do, and they've been doing this for a while now, they don't really select a color of the year. They sort of just select 4 different palettes or a few different palettes that they sort of create. And they're in my opinion, very focused on different design styles. So they don't call them these design styles, but to me, that's what they're a nod to. So they call one Chrysalis, which is really just sort of an organic modern. It's very light, it's very sort of tranquil. It's not natural sort of colors, lots of greens, beiges, browns, things like that you'd see in nature. Just a very neutral, sort of easygoing, sort of, you know, spa-like palette, which makes sense and fits with the current trend of organic modern. The next one is called Paradox, which is, you know, if you know this channel, you know exactly where this is going. This is a postmodern palette. This is one that's supposed to appeal to the Gen Zs. It's very bright, it's very bold, it's very colorful, lots of big color, primary hues, contrasting colors. I don't like it really very much, but that's okay. I think it's a little bit Technicolor for me. I just think it's a little too saturated, a little too childlike in my opinion. I don't love the palette, but I get where they're going. It's a trending style, and so they've built the palette to sort of track the style, and that's kind of working for them. The next one they have is called Wellspring. This feels a little bit of a nod to Art Deco. It's a little bit transitional, but just feels a little bit of a nod to Art Deco. Some of the images that they chose here and the words that they're using, they don't say Art Deco really, but they did talk about actually Art Deco being a popular interior design trend. So we know that, you know that, because you of course diligently watch every one of my videos, and you know I've been talking about Art Deco being trending for a good few years now. That's that palette going on there. And then they have Kindred, which is really just more of a transitional palette that's got a little bit of everything, lots of different contrast, and you know, it's kind of got a little bit of everything in the kitchen sink in that one as well, but it's a cute palette and lots of different options to sort of play with that one. So they're really design style driven, and that's how they've constructed their palette, which is a different approach. I mean, it's not a color of the year, but it's a good approach. It's colors of the year assembled into 4 distinct palettes that sort of make sense for trending design styles. That's what I'm gonna call it. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about Benjamin Moore, which is kind of, in my opinion, they are the ones that do the best job. They're, first of all, they do like a countdown on their website. Did you guys know this? They do a countdown, which is if it's like the launch of the new iPhone or something, right? Like, it's like, here's Tesla's new car. It's like Benjamin Moore's color of the year. Like, I admire the pageantry, I'll be honest. They put on a show. They put on a show and I appreciate it. So it's purple. That's the color of the year, so it's purple. It's called Cinnamon Slate, which in my opinion is like a weird name, to be honest. Like when I think of Cinnamon Slate, if I were to say this is the color Cinnamon Slate, what would you picture? I would picture like a burnt orange. That's what I would picture. That's not what it is. It's a purple, it's mauve, is what it is, it's mauve. That is not cinnamon or slate, in my opinion. So I feel like they're gaslighting me. They're also trying to say that this is a purplish brown. I admit there are brown undertones here. I think brown is a stretch, if I'm being honest. I think to categorize this in as a brown, I think it's a bit of a reach. This is a purple color with some earthiness undertones sort of in there as well. Okay, let's talk about this color. Do I like this color? I'm not raving. I don't love it because I just think it's a little Barney, it's a little purple Teletubby for me. I just don't like purple. Yep, that's it. That's full stop. I don't really like purple. And I don't like really purple in design. I don't think that, okay, here's what's going on with this palette. Okay, here's my thing. Let's first go back to, just throw our minds back a little bit. 2021, 2022. I'll summarize all the colors of the year for the last like 4 years for you. I'll just summarize the whole palette. 2021 was all about green. Okay, everybody was obsessed with green, and into 2022 as well. But they were really light. It was like October Mist and Aegean Teal or whatever. Like it was, they were all, but the October Mist palette, I mean, that was very green. Lots of greens, most of them were greens. And that was true for all the paint companies. Everybody was obsessed with green. It was a pandemic. We were like, get me the hell out of this house and into nature. You know what I mean? Like we were all about the green. And so everything was really light. Everything was really heavily tinted. So remember I talked about earlier, adding white makes it a lighter tinted color. So it was green, but it was tinted. So everything was like a light green, or like olives were everywhere. And there was some brown. It was all very natural and whatever. Then we had 2023, 2024. It was all about bold, saturated color because everybody was like, it's all about maximalism. It's all about the joy trend. It's all about, we're just going big on color, unapologetic, saturated color. So not adding a lot of white, gray, or black. We're just going full on primary hue. That's not my super vibe. It's not necessarily, but I appreciated that people were, okay, cool. It was like the callback to color. We're not doing the pale neutrals anymore. We're gonna have fun with a little bit more color. That was cool. But then for some, and then now this year, this is, I believe, moving into the darker shades, the midtones, the darker shades of sort of those primary hues. That's the story of this palette. Now, I think that's a good thing. I will say, I think, yeah, there's some room for them to be even darker in my opinion. I would say actually, you know what would have been a better color of the year in my opinion? It was actually a color that they chose before, well, they've done a couple of purples. They've actually done like a purple in like each one of the last like 4 palettes. Amazon Soil was one a few years back. That would have made a lot of sense in my opinion. I can't believe I have to pronounce this one again. Wenge, I believe it's called. It's a type of wood. Anyway, Wenge, Wenge. No, it's Wenge, I think. It's hard enough that I have to pronounce the Swedish on this channel, let alone now I have to also learn all these words I don't understand. Anyway, so there's that one. And those, in my opinion, are much darker versions of purple, which kind of like the red that I talked about earlier, I think is a little bit more successful. I think it's nicer when it's a little bit darker. If you're gonna play with some of these purples and reds, I like them more when they're darker, just my personal opinion. This one's a little light and therefore feels a little 90s mauve for me. So I don't love the color, but I appreciate the effort. So there is a lot of these sort of like mid-tones in there that kind of make sense. They're all green is still here. And I think green has now been so trending for 4 years. Like it's just has no signs of letting up here. Like, let's be honest, we've got a few browns. They're gaslighting me and telling me that this cinnamon slate is brownish. Okay, a bit of a stretch. I will give them though that leather, saddle brown, and Choning's tan is also a little bit, those are 2 browns clearly. Interestingly enough, that leather saddle brown in my opinion looks kind of like looks like it should be called cinnamon slate. And then you've got ashwood moss, and you've got rose pine, and you've got Paris rain, and even glacier white actually has a little bit, I think, of that greeny undertone as well in there. So, you know, you've still got at least 3, if not some of those whites as well, that have that greenish undertone, which for 10 colors in this palette, to have 3 of them being so obviously different shades, tints, tones, and shades of green, I think is interesting. I think ashwood moss, in my opinion, is one of my favorite colors in this palette. It's this really dark, sort of interesting moss color, which I think would look really cool. I love that there's room to play with different versions of green to create something of a monochromatic green moment, which is really cool. And greens and browns obviously work really well together. So lots of room, I think, to play with a lot of those greens and browns together in this palette. And then you've got, you've got a blue in there. There's always a blue. They got to put a blue in there because, you know, it just sort of makes sense. And I think tonally this works alongside being very similar to a cinnamon slate, as well as some of those mid-tones greens like rose pine as well. So having those, I think, kind of sitting there in the mid-tones, leaning a little bit darker is cool. So this, I think, is Benjamin Moore's admission that yes, color is here. Yes, people are liking playing with big, bold, saturated color instead of just rotating between brown and white and black and gray, which is what kind of we did for a long time. They're really sort of taking in the feedback that this last few years, seeing this trend towards color, but maybe dialing back, and instead of adding white to every color to make it sort of just a light off-white version with sort of purple, green, yellow, blue, red undertones, playing or making them super dusty by just adding gray, which is that desaturated look that you see a lot when you add gray to color. Instead, adding some gray, but also adding some black in there too to create darker shades. And I think that's a really cool thing. Now, I will also add, do I think they're gonna sell a bunch of cinnamon slate paint? No, but I would say that use this maybe as a bit of a jumping off point to some of those other purple colors. If you're interested in using this color, but you're thinking it's a little mauvey, then definitely there's lots of different colors that might make sense that I think would also work with this palette as well. Overall, it's a very cohesive palette. You can always trust Benjamin Moore to be really cohesive. They've got lots of different sort of color combinations that they use in their literature, which is also very, very helpful for people. If you are loving color, but you're thinking you don't want something heavily tinted and you don't want something really super desaturated, but you do want to have some unapologetic color in there, just maybe dial back a little bit or maybe a little bit more darker than we'd seen in years past, this could be the color palette for you. Overall, it's fine. It's not my favorite palette that they've come out with. It's not a color that I am really jumping at as the color of the year. Raspberry Blush wasn't either, neither was Blue Nova. I haven't really loved the last 3 colors. I think October Mist was probably my favorite of the last 5 sort of colors of the year that they've done. I think it's probably the color that it makes the most sense for people to actually put in their home. But again, that's some of those like lightly tinted greens as opposed to these little bit more deeper, more saturated hues that we're seeing here. So overall, love to see what people come up with. Love to see the colors that are trending right now. Do I think purple is the trending color? No, but you know, you are seeing a lot of purple, I guess more than usual, but nobody really paints their house purple. So what does that even mean, more than usual? Like more than nobody? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, some people are doing it. Anyway, it works for Benjamin Moore. It might work for you. Let me know in the comments what you think of this palette. And I'm gonna link here to last year's color of the year video. So if you're curious to see, you know, it's nice to see last year's and then this year's because you can kind of see the connection of sort of where they're going and where color is headed. See if they were right. Do you agree with what they did last year? Kind of gives you a bit of an idea on how successful this palette's gonna be. And I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks, bye.